The heavens whispered of a reckoning long before it came. In the silence of forgotten stars and on the breath of dying gods, a clash had been foretold, a collision between the embodiment of divine wrath and the most unpredictable force the universe had ever spat out. The Spectre, spirit of vengeance, had served the presence for eons, judge, jury, and executioner to the wicked. He had raised cities of the damned, turned false gods to dust, and humbled cosmic tyrants with but a glance. But for all his omnipotent justice, he was not above divine oversight. Every act of retribution came at a cost, each judgment weighed by the celestial balance. For Spectre, justice was not just a word, it was the very core of existence. Then came the whispers, not from the damned, but from heaven itself. Lobo had entered the equation. The main man, the last Zarnian, bounty hunter, intergalactic biker, unkillable madman, the universe's biggest problem child. He wasn't evil in the traditional sense. No dark lord summoning armies of the dead. No soul-sucking ambitions, but that's what made him dangerous. Lobo existed in a category of his own, unpredictable, chaotic, and gleefully immoral. He killed because it was fun. He partied harder than any mortal could survive. He once committed universal genocide as a science project in school. And worst of all, he couldn't die. Heaven didn't want him. Hell couldn't hold him. Even the presence once marked him as a cosmic error. But lately the balance had started to shift. Entire planets were being vaporized for unpaid bounties. Star systems plunged into anarchy after Lobo assassinated. High-ranking rulers for a bottle of booze. Priests of countless faiths cried out to their gods, and the presence heard. Not because Lobo had killed anyone important, he'd always done that, but because he had upset the scale of divine equilibrium. The Spectre was dispatched not to punish a single act, but to answer for a lifetime of unchecked chaos. The order was clear: find Lobo, pass judgment, execute divine wrath. It began on the desolate mining world of Travax 9, a planet once rich with ore and populated by over 1 million workers. Now it was a smoking crater. Lobo had been hired to eliminate a corrupt CEO, but true to form, he over-delivered, blowing up the entire planet just to make sure the target was really dead. The Spectre arrived, cloaked in shadows and bathed in green fire. He floated above the destruction, the cries of 1 million souls echoing in his ears. Time bent around him as he reached into the past. Replaying the final moments of Travax 9, he watched Lobo laugh hysterically while riding his space hog through the blast wave, flipping off a surveillance drone. The Spectre's eyes glowed like dying suns. "Your soul is an offense to creation," he murmured. And so, the hunt began. Tracking Lobo was like chasing a storm that didn't know it was supposed to end. He'd left a trail across 6 galaxies, every pit stop more absurd and violent than the last. A royal casino ship flipped upside down in a drunken bar fight. An interdimensional zoo accidentally freed while Lobo searched for an exotic pet. A planet-sized brothel now ruled by Lobo as its supreme loverlord. But every time the Spectre arrived, Lobo had just left. Sometimes minutes, sometimes seconds before. It became a cosmic dance of evasion, with Spectre growing increasingly furious and Lobo increasingly amused. Then one day Lobo stopped running. On the asteroid station Bloodspire Delta, Lobo sat alone at the bar, drinking space rum from a barrel. He knew Spectre was coming. Hell, he'd invited him, carving the words, "Come get me," glowy eyes, into the hull of a dead god's skull and sending it flying into the astral winds. Spectre manifested like the wrath of 1,000 angels, descending upon the asteroid with a presence that made reality buckle. Every being within 5 light minutes dropped to their knees or died outright from the sheer force of divine judgment. Lobo didn't flinch. "About time, Casper," Lobo said, burping loudly. "I was starting to think you were scared." The Spectre hovered inches away, his voice echoing like thunder rolling through cathedrals. "Lobo of Zarnia, you have defied divine order, corrupted the moral thread of creation, and mocked the sacred equilibrium. Your sins are countless. You stand condemned." Lobo scratched his chin, grinning like a wolf in a henhouse. Yeah, sounds like Tuesday. Let me guess, you gonna turn me into a flower or melt me with green flame or some spooky crap like that? No, the Spectre said. This time I end you. The laughter stopped. For the first time in a long time, Lobo's eyes narrowed. He stood from the bar, cracking his knuckles. You can try, spook boy, but let me warn you, I don't go down easy, and I don't stay down at all. The asteroid trembled as cosmic energies clashed in the air. A chill swept across the void, and the very fabric of space held its breath. What neither knew was that the universe itself was watching. The Lords of Order, the chaos beings, the new gods, even the disembodied essence of Deadman paused to observe. This wasn't just a battle of power, it was a collision of purpose. Spectre, the eternal judge born from divine will. Lobo, the ultimate anomaly born from sheer spite. What happens when justice meets someone immune to consequence? When vengeance targets a being the universe has declared unpunishable? Lobo loaded his chain and grabbed his hook. The Spectre's cloak flared like a dying sun. One fights for order, one fights for the hell of it. Neither can back down. And so, in the shadow of the collapsing Bloodspire, two cosmic forces prepared for war, not for glory, not for peace, but because the scales demanded it. The Bloodspire shook as silence gave way to chaos. Time itself twisted around the confrontation. Stars flickered uncertainly. The warp of divine energy clashed against raw brutality, and on the surface of a dying asteroid station, two legends collided. Spectre struck first. The void screamed as he stretched his cloak into a maw of green fire, engulfing Lobo in holy vengeance. The flame wasn't mere heat, it was punishment manifested, designed to sear the sins from existence. Lobo exploded, or so it seemed. Flesh tore, bones shattered, and his biker leathers burned to ash. But within seconds, Lobo's body began reforming, muscles reknitted. Skin crawled back over his frame like living armor. He stood again, completely healed, still smirking. Nice try, Spook. I've had worse hangovers. The Spectre didn't respond. He flew forward, grasping Lobo's spirit, not his body, but his very essence with his ethereal hand. He began to judge it. Visions of Lobo's sins unfolded in cosmic splendor. Planets burned, innocents crushed, gods humiliated. For ordinary beings, such judgment would reduce them to dust in both body and soul. But Lobo wasn't ordinary. The Guardian growled as his soul twisted under pressure, but instead of breaking, it snapped back. His regeneration didn't stop at the physical, it extended into the metaphysical. His soul was so steeped in irreverence that even divine law couldn't parse it cleanly. Lobo broke free with a roar and headbutted the Spectre across the crater. The spirit of vengeance slammed into a spire of black stone, cracking the entire asteroid in half. Round two glow eyes, Lobo revved his chain and threw it, the hook spiraling like a comet. It dug deep into the Spectre's chest, wrapped around his essence like a vice, and dragged him into a punch that shook the stars. The Spectre phased through dimensions, reappearing behind Lobo. You are immune to death, but not to justice. Suddenly, the very concept of guilt weighed down on Lobo. Gravity multiplied infinitely around him. His limbs buckled. Every wrong he had ever done condensed into pressure on his chest. Lobo fell to one knee. I don't. Do remorse, pal, he grunted. Then in a surge of pure willpower, Lobo reached into his own chest and ripped out the spiritual chain that bound him. His blood hit the ground like liquid hatred, warping reality where it landed. You want justice? Lobo said, staggering upright. Here's mine. He summoned his space bike, slamming into the Spectre at Mach 9, driving him through a collapsing cathedral of light. He didn't stop. He couldn't. Every part of him screamed to brawl, to break, to defy. Spectre reformed, rising like a god unbound. You stand before the fury of the presence. Yeah, and you stand before me, and I ain't moving. Then the Spectre unleashed his full might. He grew to the size of a moon, his cloak becoming an endless shroud of judgment. He called on divine fire, holy ice, sacred time. Multiversal symbols of justice orbited him like angry halos. But Lobo just laughed. With every strike, every planet-shattering blow, Lobo regenerated. Fought back, taunted, he stabbed the concept of law. He crushed the metaphor of order. He flipped the bird to existence itself. And then the Spectre began to slow. The presence of Lobo, his resistance to meaning, his unrelenting refusal to be judged, it began to erode the Spectre's power. Not because Lobo was stronger, but because Lobo was a paradox, a thing the universe had no rules for. And in that moment, Spectre hesitated, and Lobo took his head off with one brutal swing of his spiked hook. The head reformed, but now it was flickering. Spectre's glow dimmed. "No," he whispered, truly feeling, for the first time in millennia. "You cannot win." "Don't need to win," Lobo said, standing over the fading spirit. "Just need to outlast you." And that's what he did. Spectre collapsed, his form breaking apart into motes of divine essence, unable to pass judgment, unable to end what had no endpoint. Lobo stood over him, bloody, laughing, smoking a cigar lit from celestial fire. The Spectre was defeated, not by strength, not by skill, but by the sheer impossibility that was Lobo. Justice could be delayed, vengeance could be denied, but the main man, he endures.